Hello everybody and welcome to Omnipoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. I'm Jack and today we're going to be taking a look at Shadow Rider in the post-rotation format. Shadow Rider has pretty much been dominating to a large extent since its release in Shooting Rain, and obviously there are a few changes the list has to make given post-rotation. It loses a couple of important pieces, but it still looks to be a fairly solid option with one of the more consistent engines out there, so definitely worth looking into. First things first though, let's quickly just take a look at the Proton Store, where you can get plenty of PTCGO codes. As you can see, Evolving Skies will be coming soon, so make sure you head over there towards release day and pick up your PTCGO codes to be able to play from day one on with Evolving Skies on PTCGO. You can also use code Omnipoke for a 5% discount on your order, which helps us out and helps them out as well. So yeah, make sure you head over there and check them out for your PTCGO needs. Onto the deck, and the basic concept is, as ever, get lots of energy down, draw lots of cards, basically have hand advantage and be able to push into 2-shots and then 1-shots with Shadow Rider's Underworld Door ability, and then the Max Geist attack. Obviously, the tag team package has been huge for the deck, or more importantly, Gengar Mimikyu has been huge for the deck, but here and there we've also seen things like Trevnoir included in the deck as well. And it's not understated that losing tag teams does hurt Shadow Rider a lot. Because of that, I think we do have to lean into Alcremie a lot more, basically because the tempo that we could gain from stopping our opponent from doing anything with Gengar Mimikyu isn't there anymore, so decks feel a little bit more aggressive against us, a little bit higher tempo, so we need to be able to respond with something a little bit more threatening, i.e. an Alcremie doing way bigger damage for less of a payout than the sort of long game of Max Geist on Shadow Rider. We still have Cresselia, but we also have the new Galarian Articuno as well, which are some nice one prize options that skew the prize race, which could be important going forward. So onto the Pokemon, and we have the full suite of a 4/4 Shadow Rider, of course. Underworld Door is as good as ever. Being able to attach energy and draw cards is incredibly strong still, not to go understated, and obviously Max Geist is very important. Shadow Mist actually could be a pretty relevant attack as well, because still going forward it's pretty good now, but I think there's going to be a lot of capture energy going around post-rotation. So being able to stop people playing captures, you can't stop them playing it turn 1, but you can stop them playing it turn 2 or something if you need, or if you have to start Shadow Rider and can't get into something like a Cress. So yeah, Shadow Mist it definitely isn't irrelevant, and obviously Astral Barrage has uses here and there. As I mentioned, we are going to lean into Alcremie a little bit more. We have found space for a 2/2 line, and I think that is important, to be honest. Like I say, Gmax Whisk is one of the best tempo ways or tempo attacks in the deck now, to be able to keep up with decks that can be a bit more aggressive against us. We also have Adornment, which isn't terrible. It can at least set up for Gmax Whisk, so if you really are struggling to find your Shadow Riders, you can at least do some setup that way. Obviously, being weak to Zation is a bit scary, but luckily, I think in that matchup you can afford to just go down the Shadow Rider route, as long as they don't like super high roll into boss, switch boss. I think the matchup is fairly okay, and you just kind of have to avoid playing Alcremies unless they're going to win you the game. You could play down an Alcremie V, because an Alcremie V would also kill a Shadow Rider V, but you just can't evolve it into the VMAX until basically you're winning the game with Gmax Whisk in that matchup. We have one Crobat. I think it's still going to be really important. Obviously, the deck doesn't like to have too many non-psychic Pokemon on the bench, because you can't attach them, so I think one Crobat is the most I'd ever want to play, as well as Crobat naturally just not having great synergy with Underworld Door, but in the early turns you do sometimes need to panic Crobat just to get into the game anyway, so it can be important. We have one of the new Galarian Articuno with the, I think it's called Cruel Charge in English, that lets you attach to psychic energy from your hand to this Pokemon when you bench it. So that's going to be really good. One, for being able to push Max Geist up into numbers, but 2, it means that Alcremie doesn't need Shadow Riders to be threatening turn 2 like 240. It does need Shadow Riders to be able to threaten VMAXs, But being able to have a plus 120, arguably, with Cold Charge can be very important, and I think it's worth keeping that in mind. There will be situations where you never use it. There will be situations where it won't be particularly good for you, but I think it's worth having one just for kind of that panic play where you need to just take a KO there and then, and that gets you back into the game. Otherwise, obviously, you'd rather the actual physical energy in hand to be able to Underworld Door. But like I say, there will be situations where you have to use Cruel Charge. And Spiritual Laser actually isn't worth ignoring as well. 3 for 120, 3 for a 120 snipe can at least finish something off that you've hit once in the early game, so that can kind of be a nice late game finisher that you don't need to have too much setup for. You can just pretty much have it all in hand, bench it, attach the 2 energy with Cruel Charge, attach an extra energy with for Spiritual Laser, and win the game in a turn from not having the Articuno down. So yeah, it can be used as an attacker here and there. And then finally we have one Cresselia with Crescent Glow. If you're going second, you can attach 3 Psychic Energy to one of your Pokemon. This is very important in matchups where they can't really deal with your bench particularly well. Things like Eternatus, well, Eternatus is already a bad matchup, but things like Ice Rider and Victini that are going to target the bench pretty consistently. Crescent Glow isn't great, but something like a Rapid Strike or maybe even a Glaceon that, you know, is not going to be pressuring the bench too much. It means it lets Cresselia really ramp up your attachments early game and sort of get you into the game that normally the kind of tempo that you would gain from the Gengar Mimikyu of pre-rotation would give you. You can kind of front load that with Crescent Glow. Again, it's like the Articuno. It won't be used in all situations. It won't be used in all matchups. But in matchups where you feel fairly safe that the Calyrex or the Alcremie isn't going to get knocked out, pretty much in exactly things like Rapid Strike, Glaceon, stuff like that aren't going to be applying huge amounts of pressure to the bench turn 2, or at least in one swift blow, should we say. I think Cresselia is definitely important. It's also a 1 prizer, which can skew the prize trade, which is, again, very useful. Trainer-wise, we have the full 4 count of Quick Ball, Evo Incense, and Fog Crystal. Nothing to really say here. We just want to be hyper-consistent, find as many basics as possible, be able to find energy when we need them to start drawing cards, and be able to find Evo Incense to find our horses as soon as possible to draw cards. So yeah, the full 4 count of all 3 of those. We have 2 Air Balloon to switch to be able to just keep things flowing, get into the Alcremie if we haven't started it, to be able to make tempo plays. Similarly with the rope, we can use it as a switch out, but also use it as a pseudo boss, which is nice. And then Training Court, we really do need a stadium to avoid Path of the Peak just locking us out of drawing cards, and I think Training Court is basically the only one you can play. You can play something like an Old Cemetery as well as if you want, but I don't think it's worth it. I think Training Court having access to your energy to be able to recover your energy, especially after you've used GMAX Whisk, is really, really important. So yeah, 3 Training Court to bounce the stadiums, bounce the Path of the Peaks, as well as recover some of the energy you have to discard with GMAX Whisk. Onto the supporters, we have 4 Research, 4 Marnie, 3 Boss. Nothing really to say here. Again, just high counts of all of the important ones to make sure we're hitting them as and when we need. Yeah, pretty much pretty standard to be honest. And then we have a 14 Energy. Again, we want plenty of energy to be able to Underworld Door frequently, as well as have plenty for GMAX Whisk, especially if we need to use that attack twice in a game, which in certain situations you will have to. You will really have to lean into the Alcremie. So having plenty is very important. So here is the full list. Make sure you, or feel free to pause if you want a quick overview of all of the cards we are playing at once. Tech-wise, there's a couple of routes you can take. You can still play the Path of the Peak build of Shadow Rider if you want to. We have Pumpkaboo and Scoop Up Nets. Obviously, Pumpkaboo is very searchable in this list because we're already playing Fog Crystals, so this is kind of the best Pumpkaboo, or one of the best Pumpkaboo decks. So you can do all of your drawing, play a Path of the Peak down, and then next turn start your turn by using the, I think it's called Pumpkin Pit in English, the Pumpkaboo Pumpkin Pit ability to get rid of the Path of the Peak and draw a load of cards again, and then Scoop Up Net and get ready to do that next turn all over again. So yeah, you can go down that route. I think it's a lot weaker than the straight build personally, but Path of the Peak can still be crippling for certain decks. And obviously there is still the Aurora build, and in certain situations it may be, or in certain metas, it may turn out better to play the Aurora build, just because having an answer to Eternatus, as well as having the tempo from Necrozma. We've already seen that Necrozma is a very strong attacker in tempo situations, so being able to have options for that as well, rather than having to lean into tempo from your 3-prizer, your Alcremie. You can do it from your Necrozma to be able to deal with evolving Vs and things like Zacian as well. So yeah, definitely still can play the Aurora build for sure. Matchups wise, the matchups aren't terrible. I think Eternatus is a pretty much auto loss if you aren't playing the Aurora build. Aurora build definitely makes it way more favourable though. Everything else I think is manageable. I think there will be certain situations where things like Glaceon can be an issue and you might have to tech for it, but I think there will be enough people sort of teching for Glaceon to not be too worried about it. I would say it's probably negative though. On reflection, there probably should be a cross against the Glaceon thinking about it. But yeah, other than that, I think everything else seems fairly fine. Obviously, Rapid Strike is a great matchup for you. I think things like Victini, Zacian, and Calyrex can be a bit scary if they go first because they can boss you. But if they go second, they give you an extra turn, and I think that extra turn is all you need. I think going first, you're probably slightly favoured in these matchups because you have more draw power than them. But going second, you're probably unfavoured. But that is the nature of the beast that is post-rotation, so that's nothing really on the deck, to be honest. But yeah, I think the deck is still very strong. Being able to draw a hell of a lot of cards is great news, and having Alcremie to use big blow-up attacks is very important. In the Eternatus matchup, you basically have to go lone Alcremie and really just, well, not lone Alcremie, but you have to use Alcremie as your attacker and hope that they don't have enough bosses. Otherwise, it's not a particularly nice matchup. So yeah, I think if you're really worried about Eternatus, you do have to look towards Aurora build, unfortunately. But yeah, closing thoughts. It still looks really consistent. Going second can be scary, like I said, but again, that is the nature of post-rotation, and I think a lot of decks will feel like that. Going first, though, you have a lot of draw power on your side to be able to evolve your Vs, which is very important, as well as potentially being able to blow stuff up with Alcremie as of turn 2. It's pretty scary, and having Fog Crystal as well as Quick Ball as draw outs means that you're going to get a lot of basics down turn 1, which is great news because this deck just wants to fill the board pretty much. Aurora builds, like I say, may still be needed for tempo attackers in certain matchups. Necrozma V, I still think is a very, very solid card. But I think trying out the Psychic build so far, it definitely does seem like it's a lot more. It's not a lot more consistent, but not having to worry about Auroras is very nice. So yeah, there will probably be metas where Auroras are necessary, but this is just kind of the straight build that I think is still pretty strong in a lot of the top tier matchups, or at least still can represent a game plan, provided you go first. Going second, like I say, is a little bit spooky. But that being said, that's kind of, like I say, how post-rotation seems so far. So it's something we've got to get used to. But yeah, it is what it is. Other than that, thank you very much for watching. Let me know what your favourite Calyrex build is down below. Like I say, this is my favourite so far, but I can see the merit of Auroras. But yeah, maybe you've seen other ways of playing Calyrex. I'd be interested to hear all of them, so let me know down below. And other than that, thank you very much for watching. I've been Jack from Omnipoke, and I look forward to seeing you guys in another video. Cheers, everyone.